That's my favorite bumper we've ever done. I love it. Because it reminds us this is ultimately about the glory of God. We're going to talk a little bit about money today. If you're the pastor who likes talking about money, then you're probably in the wrong profession. I don't really enjoy it. I'm not really talking totally about money as much as I'm talking about the abilities and the resources God has given us. But let me tell you something, one reason why I don't like talking about money. I like it. I like it a lot. When I was in high school, I was very ambitious, and my brother and I owned a landscaping business. My brothers, one did a lot more. And I graduated high school with $18,000 in the bank. What high school kid does that, right? And I was just very ambitious. And then I went off to college and with the purpose of, and I graduated college with $23,000 in the bank. Who does that? And part of it was just I was very frugal, to say the least. And part of it was I was just very diligent with my money. And part of it is I liked having a nice little nest egg to sit on, you know? And then a strange thing happened. I got married. Worth every penny. Every penny. I don't have that money anymore, though. And so reality is I've struggled with money a lot through my life. But your money will either own you or you will own your money. And when I look at the teaching of Jesus and I'm reminded that Jesus taught on money about 15% of the time, I think it's important we understand why God gives us money and resources and ability. If you have your Bibles, we're going to look at Matthew chapter 25 today. Matthew chapter 25. If you don't have a Bible, there should be one around you, and feel free to take that as our gift from us to you. Matthew chapter 25. Matthew 25. We're going to begin reading in verse 14 as we go forward today. Matthew 25:14. For it is just like a man going on a journey. He called his own slaves and turned over his possessions to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1. A talent is the equivalent of modern day about $6,000. So to one man he left $30,000. To another he left around $12,000. And the other one he left $6,000. It was a weight of measurement of money. Immediately, the man who had received the 5 talents went and put them to work and earned 5 more. Verse 17. In the same way, the man with 2 earned 2 more, but the one who had received 1 talent went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. The man who had received 5 talents approached, presented 5 more talents, and said, Master, you have given me 5 talents. Look, I've earned 5 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful slave. You were faithful over a few things, and I will put you in charge of many things. Share your master's joy. Then the man with 2 talents also approached. He said, Master, you have given me 2 talents. Look, I've earned 2 more talents. And his master said to him, Well done, good and faithful slave. You were faithful over a few things, and I will put you in charge of many things. Share your master's joy. Then the man who received 1 talent also approached him and said, Master, I know you. You're a difficult man, reaping what you haven't sown and gathered where you haven't scattered seed. So I was afraid and went off and hid your talent in the ground. Look, you have what is yours. But his master replied to him, You evil, lazy slave, if you knew that I reap when I haven't sown and gather where I haven't scattered, then you should have deposited my money with the bankers, and when I had returned, I would have received my money back with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents, for to everyone who has more will be given, and he who has more than enough. But from the one who does not have, even that which he will not be taken away from him. And throw his good-for-nothing slave into the outer darkness, in the place that there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Who's ready for lunch, right? That's a hard, difficult passage. And as I look at this passage and I struggle with this, I sit there and I go, God, this does not seem fair. Have you ever felt like life isn't fair? God, I'm doing my part. Why is life not fair? Because here's the reality. Fair is not a biblical promise. It may be an American idea. You have rights, and we have this idea of you can be fair, but one of the best lessons you can teach your kids is life is not fair. Do you know, my kids like to fight sometimes. Did any of your kids ever fight? I'm just saying. Keeping it real. And so they fight occasionally, and one will go, "You're not being fair." And I go, "You're right, because sin has entered the world." And when sin entered this world, it basically means that fairness kind of left the window. And in a sense, we should be glad, because if everything was fair, in other words, you got what you deserved, then you and I would deserve hell. Eternal separation from God. And you might sit there and go, "Oh, I kind of get that, but I want something better than that. I want something, what about what I get?" And hear me, I think too much is given, much is required. And when we're faithful to God, He provides, but I don't think it means that you get everything you want. Did I share already? I'm really having a brain freeze. Did I share my story in Auburn yet in the service? No. When I was in Auburn, Alabama, I was a campus minister. And when I was there, I'm having a deja vu moment. It's because I shared it in the last service, okay? When I was there in Auburn, I made a good salary, but not really. It was not a good salary. In fact, if my wife wasn't working, it qualified me. I would have qualified for food stamps. That's about my salary as a minister. Woohoo! Okay, and so, but my wife and I were very faithful to this. And about 8 months after my wife got pregnant, she walked in the door one day and said to me this: "Guess what? I retired." And I knew this was coming. My wife and I'm not saying this is right for everyone, but this is something my wife and I decided to do. This was our decision, and we felt and we prayed, and for us, that's all I'm saying, for us, we felt like this was the right decision. And so we were sitting there going, okay, the money's going to get tight, right? We're about to get tight with the money. And so we kind of wrestled with this idea, and we said, okay, we're going to be faithful. And we came up with a very small budget. We said, we're going to do this, and we're going to live in this way. Well, before my son was born, my first son, we had a pool in the backyard. And it was the pool in the backyard was kind of an anomaly. Why would this? Because we didn't live in a big house. In fact, the pool devalued the value of the home, because most people who buy the size home we were living in don't want a pool because they can't afford to take care of it. You see what I'm saying? And it was a 1960s kind of gunite pool, skateboarder pool. Anybody witness? And so it was in bad shape, and that's part of the reason we got the deal in the house to get the house. And my wife was 8 months pregnant. She had just retired, and we go out to the backyard, and I go out to the backyard, and I look at the pool, and I go, water's a little low, about 5 inches low. So I get the garden hose, fill it up, and go out the next day, and I look out, and I sit there, and I go, that water's lower today than it was yesterday, and I just filled it up. This is not good. So we were in Auburn, Alabama. Auburn is smaller. The community is smaller than the greater Lafayette area. So we called the pool guy in the area. And he came out and looked at our house, and he looked at this pool, and he goes, "Yeah, it's kind of like driving a 300,000-mile car. I can probably fix your problem, but you need a whole new pool." And he goes, "That'll cost about $5,000. My wife had just quit work. We had about $23 in the bank. And he's sitting here telling me the pool's going to be $5,000. So I'm sitting there going, okay, this is not good at all. And so I sit there and I go, okay, what should we do about this? And so I got a brilliant idea, and I looked at the pool guy and I go, my wife's 8 months pregnant. We don't really want our son running around here anyway, so what would it cost to just fill it in? And he kind of looked at me and he kind of cocked his head and gave me one of those smiles like, he goes, about $5,000. Didn't have many choices. The next pool guy was in Montgomery, which was over an hour away. He probably was not going to give me a discount coming in. And so I just sat there, and Emily and I go, what are we going to do? Well, we prayed that night, feeling fully that my wife, she'd already quit her job, so it wasn't like she could just go back and go, hey, I want to work again now. By the way, I'm giving birth. It doesn't work that well. And so we were sitting there having this conversation, and we just prayed. And The next morning, we woke up with a plan. As a young 20-something-year-old man, I was going to call my father and say, we know we aren't going to be here forever, so when we sell the house, can you advance us the money, the $5,000, and when we sell the house, we'll pay you back out. That is the last thing a young man wants to do when his wife is 8 months pregnant, call daddy for a loan. My pride was just beat down like you wouldn't believe. And I remember wrestling with this idea and struggling with this. And my wife and I we're going to have to do this. But before we called anyone, before we let any of our parents know what was going on, and my wife went out to the mailbox and she came in and she had an envelope from her grandfather. As she opened the envelope from her grandfather, there was a letter in it that said, "Sweetie, we love you so much. And I want to see you enjoy your inheritance. So please accept this check for $5,000. You see, I don't think you'll be rich. We are not a prosperity gospel kind of place. But I think that God provides." And as you're looking at this parable that we just read, and you realize the master has come, and he's left you all of these resources and all of these abilities and all of these gifts and strengths, and he's saying to you, what are you going to do with them? What are you going to do? I struggle with this because I sit there and I go, the man buried it. He didn't waste it. But really, this isn't a matter of the money. It's a matter of the heart. None of this is a matter of money. It's a matter of heart. Are you willing to take what God has given you and make other followers? Or are you just in this, sitting in here for yourself? If you're here just for yourself, you're probably missing the point of what this is really about. And as I look at this passage, you find that the man with 5 talents made 5 talents and was given more. And I sit there and I go, what's going on with that? That doesn't seem fair. But until I realize what he's saying there's 2 really important principles that you have to gather from here, right? And the first one is this: too much is given, much more is required. It even says that here. It says, verse 29, for everyone who has, more will be given, and he will be given more than enough. In other words, the more I give you, the more that you're given to require. Too much is given, much is required. If you think you're a 5-talent person, congratulations. I don't think there are very many 5-talent people in the world. I'm talking maybe Rick Warren, kind of, Billy Graham. I think there's maybe some 4.5 talent type people there. But if you think you're a 5-talent people, be careful because you're probably a little arrogant. Just warning you. It's like the person who has a plaque on their wall that says, I'm the most humble person I know, And as we struggle with this, you got to realize, if God has given you an abundance of wealth, why did he give it to you? To sit on it? To bury it? Too much is given, much is required. If God has given you an abundant ability to communicate and speak, there's times when, to be honest with you, it'd be easier if I wasn't a pastor. I could probably make a whole lot more money doing something else. I could probably be a pretty convincing salesman. I have some swampland, and I'd like to sell you that. Part of me would like that, and because I sit there and go, I can make the bank dollars roll in. But God has called me to this. And we don't suffer. We have a really nice home. Matter of fact, I feel like I'm very blessed. But God has asked me to use what he's given me to help others find Jesus. Sometimes we look at this though and we go, I understand, Daniel, that you're comfortable speaking. I would never do that. And I understand that some people have lots of money to give, and I'm thankful for that. But Daniel, I'm a single mom trying to raise 3 kids. I'm 1 talent. I don't even have a half a talent, it feels like. And I'm sitting here, you're sitting here going, God, what do you want from me? And God says, give me you. Because not only is the truth, too much is given, much is required. To those given little, it doesn't mean that much isn't required. Here's the reality. Talents Finances all apply with the same principle. In serving, typically in any given church, whatever resource ability you have, 20% of the people do 80% of the work, 20% of the people give 80% of the money, 20% of the people do 80% of the ministry. What would it look like if we all gave our talents and resources to make followers of Jesus? I told you the other night we had 42 family units, including 2 interns, our custodial staff, the senior staff, young couples who have financial loans still here. This wasn't all the wealthy people, okay? There were some that aren't hurting for money, but this was a big variety of people. And the reality is we raised over $1 million, but here's what our pledge to over $1 million. Here's the reality, and I'm going to say this with fear and trepidation because I don't know how you're going to hear it, but I just want you to think about this. 42 family units pledged over $1 million. We have over 240 other family units here. If every person here would give if this same group of people would give of what they could give, if we would sacrifice of what it takes to sacrifice, we could build this building twice in cash. If everybody would be willing to do what it takes to, from the intern pay to the wealthiest person here, if everybody would sacrifice at the same level and come to the understanding whether I have 5 talents or 1 talent I would be willing to do, we could not only build this building, pay off our existing mortgage, but we would have about $2 million left over to give away in missions. What's your part? And sometimes we look at this and we sit there and you go, that's great, Daniel, but why would these people do this? Let me look at Matthew chapter 13, verse 44. Matthew 13, 44. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure buried in a field that a man found and reburied, and then in his joy he goes and sells everything he has and buys that field. Why would he do that? Okay, so let's put this in modern day illustration kind. Let's say you're that guy who comes up with a hobby and goes and buys a metal detector, right? You know? And you're convinced that going out to the Tipco field with that metal detector, that $300 investment is going to pay off because you're going to find a bunch of quarters that moms drop out when they're giving their kids concession stands, you know? And so you're out in the Tipco field out there on the soccer field, you go, woohoo, quarter, woohoo! I only need to do that 1,200 more times and I pay for this machine. And so you're sitting around going and you go, beep, beep, quarter, beep, beep, quarter. All right, feeling good. Oh, no, it's only a penny, but that's okay. Making good progress. And you're going out this metal detector in this field, and all of a sudden, your machine starts going, you know, I don't know if it does that or not, but just bear with me. And it goes crazy. It's like going beep, 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 beep. And you said, you're going, this is weird. And so you go and you start scraping away, and all of a sudden you find this big old treasure chest, like Redbeard the pirate somehow found himself in West Lafayette, Indiana before it was West Lafayette, and buried his treasure knowing that no one in their earthly mind in that day and age would have come over to West Lafayette looking for Redbeard's treasure, okay? Anybody named Redbeard had to be a good person, but he wasn't. But anyways, I don't know why I said that. Stop. Okay, so there's this treasure. This ginormous treasure. And let's say that this treasure is worth $4 million, okay? And so you're sitting there going, woohoo, mother lode. And so you go put it back in the ground and you bury it up and you realize, I don't own this field. What if this field cost $100,000? How can I raise the money? And so you sit there and you go, okay, man, I've got to go to the bank. And so you refinance your loan and you find that I get money here and you're not quite enough there. So what can I sell on Craigslist, you know? And so you sit there going, yeah, that antique clock, it's okay, got to go, woohoo! And so you're willing to sacrifice that precious shotgun that belonged to my great-great-grandfather. It's got to go, you know, that kind of thing. Is no eating out for the next 5 weeks because this loan's going to take time to process. I'm going to live on ramen, no Starbucks. I'm going to not have have Coke. I'm going to do whatever it takes because this temporary pain is going to pass because I'm going to get the mother load of money, right? It doesn't seem like a sacrifice at that point. Not having cable or internet doesn't seem like a sacrifice because the treasure is coming. The treasure has already come. And his name is Jesus. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, with both our talents, both serving and our financial resources, what are we willing to do so that others might have eternal life with him? This is a struggle we all have to face. But I think it comes back to the idea of we understand what the treasure is. See, God sent his son, Jesus, to die on a cross. And when he died on a cross for you and for me, he did it not because it was fair, but because he loved us. He sacrificed everything so that you might have eternal life. And because we have that, we get the joy of giving back to him. We struggle with this because we struggle with our perception of what it means to give God. We struggle because we struggle with this idea of, oh, do I really have to? But when you really understand what it takes, let me do it this was not my illustration. I want to give Perry Noble credit for where credit is due, but I'm not this smart, but I like this illustration. So I've asked my friend Brandon to come up on stage. Brandon, come on up. His wife does not know yet. I don't think that he's coming up, so this is going to be fun. Don't worry, I'm not going to call on you. Brandon, I want to give you some cookies. Don't open them yet. Just stare at them longingly. They're sugar cookies. What you need to know about sugar cookies is there's God's gift to man, okay? Roger. Yeah, this is sugar cookie right here, okay? It's a giant sugar cookie. and when you look at these sugar cookies, let me ask you something. I just gave Brandon those sugar cookies, right? So if I were to say, Brandon, can I have a sugar cookie right now? How many of you think that would be really hard for him to do? Because I just gave him it, right? You think it would be hard? Anybody think it would be hard? I think if he didn't give it to me, you would sit there and go, that's pretty selfish, right? Now, let's say that Brandon brought these sugar cookies from home. His wife had made them, and they're great. Maybe even Brandon made them. Did you make? No. Okay, but so let's say he worked, somebody in his household worked hard to make these cookies, and they brought them, and he brought them for a snack for himself. And let's say he was sitting there eating the cookies, and I saw those sugar cookies that he brought for himself from his home, and I said, Brandon, can I have one of those sugar cookies? How many of you then would think he's selfish? He wouldn't be perceived as selfish that way, right? In fact, some of you might go, the gall of the pastor asking him for his hard-worked, hard-earned, baked cookies. How dare you? Sugar cookies are life, people. Because it's the perception. Thank you, Brandon. You have a seat. What you realize then is you can even keep those cookies and share them with people. The reality is, those cookies are representative of everything God has given us. If you walk in here going, I've earned this, my hard work, my life, everything I've done is about me, then you're going to be much less likely and much less inclined to want to give to God. But the reality is, everything that you have, every talent, every ability, every penny, every dollar is a gift given to you by God to manage for his name. Would you be willing to share and give back? The Bible asks us to do this, and this is where we're gonna go to Medlin. If you're angry, send an angry email to toaks@calvarybc.net. He'd love to hear it. I'm just kidding. I'll be glad to talk with any of you, just not on Sunday, okay? God asks us to give something called a tithe. That's 1/10 of our income to God. And sometimes here's what we do. We give our tithe and there's 16 cookies in there. So Brandon sits there and goes, okay, I got to give 10% of 16. So God, here's the one. And now I've got to do the math. And we get out a scalpel and cut up the second cookie so that we don't give God more than is due. But God wants you to give more than just a tithe. In fact, he wants you to give to stuff like this, above and beyond, so that others might know of Jesus. Now, let me say, from the legalistic standpoint, all Brandon would have to do is to tithe on that, is to give one and whatever the math is of that other portion of the cookie. But you know what happens? He's been given a lot there. What happens if he goes home and he sits there and thinks, oh, I get to keep all of this. I gave God his portion, and then he just starts going, cookie 1, cookie 2, cookie 3, 4, 5, 6. And all of a sudden he's eating 15 cookies, 14 in what portion cookie. You know what happens? He gets sick. Because maybe he wasn't supposed to be eating that much. See, sometimes you are given much more out of abundance, and to not give it away will make you sick. It's sweet. This feels like mine, and I want to eat it, because who doesn't want to eat that? But what you realize is you're just ruining your life. God has given you much to be used for his glory, for his name. So here's the challenge. Would you start giving to this church? Not for the pastor to have a bigger salary, but so that God's glory can be known. Would you start giving? Maybe 10% is just like outlandish to you. Start with 5% and give. And watch the world change as your heart becomes more generous. And then, would you prayerfully this week go to page 13, and out of the joy of finding God, ask God to show you where you should be. The fact is, we need a couple more really significant financial gifts. All the gifts are significant. But we're going to need a couple more high dollar ones, I guess is the best way to say that delicately. I don't think there's any gift that's in God's eyes different from the person who gives 1,000, that's a great sacrifice, to the person who gives $200,000, that's a great sacrifice. The key is to sacrificially give, so that we can make followers who make followers, because it all boils down to this. The treasure that we have found is Jesus. Not that we deserve it. His grace found us. And we see it every day in the newborn's cry. We see it in the morning sunlight. We see it in the magnitude and in the greatness of God, who, despite our selfishness and despite our ways that we fall down on our knees, and despite our troubles in our marriages, in our struggle in work, and our selfish ambition, our lack of dedication in raising our children, in our brokenness, his grace still finds us. It blows my mind. And so I want to give. It's no longer a burden, because I have found the greatest joy the world has ever known, and his name is Jesus Christ. And I just want to invite you to share in that joy. So God, with open arms, be real to us. God, may we sense the fact that your love has loved us and has invaded our life. So God, may we be faithful in giving our heart to you, and let the rest follow the way. God, may we find the joy that it means to understand what your grace is. An unconditional, unmerited love that will not go away. So God, as we're about to sing, may we breathe in your grace and then breathe it out for the world to see how great you are. The Alpha, the Omega, the beginning and the end. The loving Father, the righteous warrior, our shield, our banner, our strength, our refuge in the storm, our calm seas in the middle of a raging tempest. You are our peace as the walls crumble around us. You are unconditional love. You are Jesus. And we thank you that you have found us today.
Thank you for watching our podcast. If this podcast has affected you in any way or you would like prayer, we would love to hear from you. Send us an email at amen@calvarybc.net.